Hello, I'm Shazza and welcome to my channel Hooked on Books. This week the Man Booker International Prize Longlist was announced, and this is what I like to think of as my prize. This is the prize that I get like really excited about. I look forward to it. I love it. It's my favourite literary prize out there. And that's because there's been so many titles that have ended up on the long list or short list in previous years that I have absolutely loved. I also just think that if a book is good enough to be published and translated, there must be something at least remotely good within that novel. So that's why I really just trust translated books to be good. I've never read one and not liked it, so I have strong faith that any translated book that I ever pick up is going to be good. So in previous years, there's some books that I've read and loved, like A Whole Life. I also have A Strangeness in My Mind to read. I've just been put off that basically because of sheer size, but I have it and definitely want to read it. I read Compass and absolutely loved it. Yeah, brilliant book. I also have Swallowing Mercury to read as well. The Vegetarian, love it. And My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante, love it. And I'm sure there's plenty of others that I have read or have on my shelves to read. But yes, every year... How could I forget Fever Dream? Fuck. Fever Dream. Where's Fever Dream? Smells the... I'm just in work and I'm going to have to go find it. Samantha Schweblin. SC. It's on display. And Fever Dream by Samantha Schweblin. We all know that I love this as well. So yes, there's quite a few books that have been on the long list, short list, books that I've discovered through the Man Booker International Prize. And that's why I love it, because a lot of the time it draws my attention to books that I have not heard of, and I end up loving them. So I was very excited about the long list coming out. And I'm going to tell you about the ones that I'm most interested in. I did say to myself before the long list was announced that I was maybe going to attempt to read the entirety of the long list. The only reason I get put off that is because I'm trying not to read hardback books, so if I can get hold of them in the library then I will do. Although I'm kind of excited that I might just end up giving in and buying them all. But yeah, I'm going to show the ones that I'm most interested in. So first up we've got Die My Love. So I already own this one, and the reason I picked this one up is because it was compared to Virginia Woolf. And what I love about Virginia Woolf is her writing. I love that stream of consciousness. I love that I feel it's got that sort of, a lot is said sort of in between the lines, and I love that. I love how she draws female characters. I feel like they're really fully realised individuals, and they're interesting, and yeah, I just love getting inside their minds. So I was kind of hoping to get that from this one. I've read the first couple of pages and I love it already. I absolutely love it already. It's described on the back, describes it best here as it's about motherhood, womanhood, the banality of love, the terrors of desire, the brutality of another person carrying your heart forever. So I have a feeling that I'm going to absolutely love this one, especially because I just have like a real thing for shorter books. Every time I see them on a bookshelf, I always seem to pick them out, and that's why I ended up getting this one, is because it was one that I just found randomly on the shelf. So it's quite exciting to see that it's now got long listed, and I am really enjoying it so far. Next up we've got The Seventh Function of Language. I'm kind of interested in this one, although I'm not entirely sure. This one is about Roland Barthes, who has just been hit by a laundry van and he is killed. Minutes after he's just had a meeting with his advisors, and then what ensues is this sort of investigation. Was it an accident? Was it an assassination? What if he was holding an important document that showed the seventh function of language, which is described here as an idea so powerful it gives whoever masters it the ability to convince anyone in any situation to do anything. It's a book that looks at linguistics and philosophical and sociological debates, but it's meant to do it in a very sort of satirical and humorous way. So I do believe that this is meant to be very, very funny. I'm not sure if this is one that's going to go completely over my head. I like to think that I'm clued up enough in philosophy and linguistics in order to get it, but I'll just have to wait and see with this one. But yeah, I just know that it's meant to be very, very funny, and I have an interest in philosophy, so I think that it might work for me. Next up we've got Frankenstein in Baghdad. I remember seeing this one come into work and I just was instantly interested because I love Frankenstein. I love the themes, I love the setting, I love the writing, I just love everything about it. So this is about a guy who finds a bunch of body parts and he sews them together in order to create a human form, and he does this in the hope that the government recognises the human, and so that they recognise that these individuals deserve a proper burial. But what ends up happening is, of course, that this human form ends up becoming a monster of sorts, and the story goes from there. So I am interested in it. When it first came in, I was like, this could either be really, really good or it could be really, really bad. So I held off on it. But now that it's got longlisted, I'm much more interested. I do think that it's probably got some literary merit in there, as well as being a good sort of fun, interesting take on Frankenstein. Next up is one of the ones that I hadn't heard of before, and that's because it hasn't been published yet, and that is The Flying Mountain. So it's kind of no secret that I have an interest in authors that like to employ a little bit of a unique narrative style, and this one is written entirely in verse, so already I am very much interested in this one. It's a story about two brothers who go off on this journey to find a unknown mountain that hasn't been mapped. And then it ends up being this journey about their relationship, their past, their present, their difficulties between each other, and then sadly one of them doesn't return. So I feel like this is one of those books that's going to have a lot of that beautiful sadness that I really love, so I am looking forward to that one, definitely. Next up we've got Flights. I primarily want to read this because it's in the Fitzcarraldo editions, and I just trust Fitzcarraldo editions. I just already know that this is going to be brilliant. This sounds like a sort of musing novel looking at travel and humanity in a really sort of thoughtful and philosophical way through many different characters and their experiences. I don't know much more than that, other than that it won Poland's sort of biggest literary prize. And yeah, I just trust Fitzcarraldo editions, so I am definitely going to be picking this one up. Next up we've got The Impostor. I'm really interested in this one just because it's based on truth. It's about this guy who pretended to be a Nazi Holocaust survivor, and he ended up becoming the leading president of Spain's main Holocaust survival movement, and that just baffles my brain. It looks like it ends up being a novel that looks at how we all delude ourselves, and it looks like it's going to be sort of an interesting examination of truth and deception, so I feel like this one could be really good. I nearly bought this a little while ago just as a pure cover buy. I love the cover of this. It definitely, yeah, I'm interested in it mostly because of the cover. It's about this guy who ends up on the streets just after things have kind of gone to shit for him, basically. But it turns out he's got the last final recording of this famous musician just before he overdosed. So what ends up happening is that everyone in the world seems to be after this guy who's just become homeless. So it sounds like a really good story wrapped up in this sort of historical music context, so I think that this one could be a really fun, interesting story, but I just absolutely love the cover of this one more than anything. Next up we've got The White Book, of course. This is one that I already really wanted to read anyway, so I'm very excited that it's on the long list. This is a story about a girl who starts to think about the death of her sister who died 2 hours after her birth, and she thinks about this in the context of the colour white. So for instance, the white colour of the breast milk that her sister never got to have. So it sounds like a really sort of poetic, thoughtful book, and I'm very, very excited to read this one. I will be reading this regardless if it gets on the shortlist or not. I love The Vegetarian, and I just have high hopes for this one as well. Next up we've got The Dinner Guest. This is one that I saw on the shelf a little while ago and nearly picked it up. This is about Gabriella, whose grandfather is murdered by terrorists. It's also about her mother who passes away from cancer. So 2 very traumatic and difficult deaths, very different but also very impactful, so I think that that'll be quite interesting to see that. I know that this is meant to be sort of in a documentary style, so that's kind of what's piqued my interest about this one. I'm interested to see how this is written. Next up we've got The Stolen Bicycle. This is about this character who's a writer who decides to track down his father who disappeared along with his bicycle, and he ends up trying to track down the bicycle itself in the hope to find answers, and it ends up being this sort of look at the history of Taiwan and the history of the bicycle, and it's told through many different characters, so it sounds like it interweaves the past and the present, so I think this could be an interesting one as well. Next up we've got Go Went Home. This is about a guy who's recently retired, and he encounters this group of African asylum seekers, and he ends up getting to know them and befriend them. So the refugee crisis is obviously a very topical and very relevant subject at the moment, so I'm definitely interested to read this one because of that. I'm just looking forward to reading a novel about homelessness and the idea of belonging. Next up we've got The World Goes On. I've been meaning to read this author for so long. The Melancholy of Resistance is one that I've had my eye on for years. I don't know why I haven't picked it up yet. I really, really want to read it, but I guess I'll be starting with this one instead. So I know that this is a selection of short stories. I've heard that it's compared to Kafka. I feel like if it's compared to that, then I'm going to love it. I really hope that it lives up to that. Other than that, I don't know much about it. I don't necessarily expect this to make the shortlist or to win because it is a selection of short stories, and I feel like short stories are really hard to love because there's always going to be ones that are going to be better than the other, but I'm excited to read this nonetheless. Next up we've got Like a Fading Shadow. This is about James Ray, who murdered Martin Luther King and evaded the FBI for 2 months, so I think an interesting subject. I know it's meant to be a bit of a blend of genres. I think mostly what I'm interested in is that it is that mix of sort of true crime and historical fiction, so I'm interested to see what this one ends up being like as well. So there we go, that is the entire long list for the Man Booker International Prize 2018. I have reason to be interested in every single one of the books on this list. We'll see how many I get through. I am really, really enjoying Die My Love, so I will be talking about that at some point, and I'll hopefully go through most of these and maybe do a review for each of them, and we'll just see how I get through them. But I am very excited. If you're interested in any of these, just let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on them. And yeah, thank you for watching, guys, and I will see you again soon. Bye.